What if I told you that one of the most secular nations in Europe, a land that for over a century proudly declared itself free from religion, is now quietly experiencing a spiritual comeback? What if the very country that many thoughts had buried, Catholicism forever, is now seeing faith rise from the ashes? This is France. It's the land of revolutions, the land of philosophy and reason. It's the land that once echoed with the cry for freedom from kings and priests alike. For decades, France has been seen as the graveyard of faith, a place where churches became monuments, where masses grew silent, where God was spoken of more in history books than in living hearts. But something remarkable is unfolding, something no one expected. Beneath the layers of modernity, consumerism, and skepticism, a quiet but undeniable Catholic revival is stirring. Stay with me until the end of this journey, because what is happening in France today is not just about one country. It is a story with meaning for the entire world. If Catholicism can rise again here in the very heart of European secularism, then perhaps there is no place too far gone, no nation too cold, no soul too distant to be touched by God again. To understand this surprising revival, we must first step back and grasp the long road that brought France to where it is today. The French story with Catholicism is one of deep love and deep conflict. For centuries, France was called the eldest daughter of the Church. Kings were crowned in Reims Cathedral. Monasteries dotted the countryside. Great saints like Joan of Arc, Thérèse of Lisieux, and Vincent de Paul rose from its soil. Faith was not just personal, it was national. The rhythm of life itself was Catholic. Sundays meant Mass. Holy days marked the calendar. Families passed down prayers, pilgrimages, and traditions through generations. But history changed dramatically with the French Revolution of 1789. In that era of upheaval, the Catholic Church was not just seen as a spiritual guide, but as a partner of monarchy and power. Revolutionaries, hungry for liberty, equality, and fraternity, viewed the Church as a chain holding the people back. Churches were seized, clergy were exiled, imprisoned, or even executed. In Notre Dame itself, altars were stripped and replaced with a so-called Temple of Reason. A nation that once prayed together now raised the banner of reason and progress as its new creed. Although the Church regained some freedoms in the 19th century, the divide was never healed. By 1905, the famous Law of La Cite was passed, officially, separating church and state. On paper, it sounded like neutrality. In practice, it became a cultural identity. To be French meant to embrace secularism. Schools no longer taught faith. Children learned to revere the Republic above religion. Public life was stripped of prayer, processions, or crosses. Religion was pushed into the private sphere, something for home, not for the classroom, the government, or the streets. Over the decades, this separation sank deeper into the national bloodstream. Mass attendance began to fall, slowly at first, then sharply after the social revolutions of the 1960s. By the dawn of the 21st century, fewer than 5% of French Catholics were attending Sunday Mass. That meant in a nation of 60 million people, barely a couple of million still went regularly. In some rural dioceses, one priest had to serve 10 or even 15 parishes. Vocations collapsed. Seminaries that once held hundreds of young men training for the priesthood now counted fewer than a dozen. Catholic weddings declined, baptisms declined. Even funerals, once automatically Catholic, were increasingly secular. Ceremonies. For many French families, Catholicism became little more than heritage. Cathedral in the town square was admired as a piece of history, not a house of worship. The rosary belonged in a grandmother's drawer, not in the hands of her grandchildren. Catholic holidays like Christmas or Easter remained on the calendar, but were celebrated more as culture than as conviction. For the modern Frenchman, faith was often dismissed as outdated, irrelevant, or even oppressive. France became, in the eyes of the world, the example of a post-Christian society. Journalists, historians, and sociologists pointed to it as proof that religion would eventually fade everywhere. Look at France, they said. This is the future of the West. And yet, that prediction was missing something. Because while the institutions were declining, and while public faith was fading, something deeper was happening beneath the surface. A paradox was forming. In pushing religion so firmly to the margins, France had created a vacuum of meaning. People had freedom, they had modern comforts, had political rights. But many quietly admitted they did not have purpose, they did not have transcendence, they did not have hope that reached beyond the material. In the quiet hearts of young adults, a hunger began to grow. Disillusioned by consumerism, weary of constant competition, and unsatisfied by a purely material worldview, they began to ask questions their culture had no answers for. Why am I here? What is the purpose of my life? Where do I find lasting joy? These were not questions a secular ideology could satisfy. And into that emptiness, Catholic faith, long thought buried, began to whisper again. The first sparks of revival came through new ecclesial movements. Communities like the Emmanuel community in Chamonix started gathering young people for retreats, praise nights, and Eucharistic adoration. Thousands of young French Catholics began experiencing something their parents had missed, a living encounter with Christ. These communities didn't just preserve tradition, they made it alive. They prayed with guitars and with Gregorian chant, with silence and with song. They preached not as outdated rules, but as living testimony. And young people came, drawn not by obligation, but by authentic joy. At the same time, France's increasingly multicultural population breathed new vitality into parishes. Immigrants from sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia, and the Middle East filled pews that once stood empty. Their vibrant songs, fervent prayers, and bold public faith reignited a Catholic energy in cities like Paris, Lyon, and Marseille. A French parish that once saw 20 elderly worshippers might now be alive with 200 voices, young and old, praying with passion. The irony is striking. The very nation that tried to silence Catholicism was now seeing its churches revived by those who brought faith with them from abroad. This revival was not institutional. It was not political. It was personal. It was authentic. And that is precisely why it is growing. But to truly see how deep this shift is, you must look at the stories, the real lives being changed. Take the story of Jean-Baptiste, once a proud Marxist. He believed religion was nothing more than an illusion to keep the people down. He debated philosophy. He championed revolution. But late at night, he confessed to himself that the victories felt hollow. One day, almost by accident, he accepted an invitation to a silent retreat. In the chapel, before the Eucharist, something broke open in him. He felt a presence stronger than argument. A love that outlasted any ideology. He could not explain, but he could not deny it. Today, Jean-Baptiste is preparing for the priesthood, is no longer preaching theories of power. He is proclaiming the gospel of grace. Or consider Sophie, a successful Parisian businesswoman. She had climbed the corporate ladder, traveled the world, and built a six-figure career. But with every achievement, her heart grew heavier. She confessed that she felt empty even in her greatest successes. One evening, wandering the streets, she stepped into a small parish chapel. Eucharistic adoration was taking place. In the golden stillness, Sophie felt the gaze of Christ upon her, not with judgment, but with love. That encounter changed everything. She left her career behind and is now a religious sister, praying for the very world she once tried to conquer. These are not isolated miracles. They are part of a larger pattern. In 2023, more than 7,000 adults were baptized into the Catholic Church in France. That is the highest number in decades. Behind every baptism is a story. A young man from a secular family, a woman from an atheist background, a student who stumbled onto a podcast about God, a refugee who encountered Christ in a parish that welcomed him. These conversions are happening quietly, often hidden from the headline, but they are real. And perhaps the most powerful part of this movement is that it is being led by the young. This generation of Catholics in France is not content with cultural Christianity. They are not going to church because their parents told them to. They are going because they encountered Christ personally. They are hungry for truth. They are hungry for transcendence. They're unafraid to kneel, unafraid to pray, unafraid to be visibly Catholic in a culture that still treats faith with suspicion. From Paris to Lourdes, from small village chapels to university classrooms, the signs are clear. Catholic faith in France is not dead. It is alive. It is rising. And this is only the beginning. If the first sparks of revival in France came through small communities and personal conversions, the second wave is happening in a far more visible way. Across the nation, young Catholics are gathering in numbers that few thought possible just 10 or 20 years ago. And what is unfolding in front of us is nothing short of breathtaking. Let us begin with the pilgrimages. France has always been home to sacred routes, ancient roads once walked by saints and pilgrims. But in recent years, these paths have been rediscovered by a new generation. One of the most remarkable examples is the Chartres pilgrimage, a 3-day journey that covers nearly 70 miles from Paris to the Cathedral of Our Lady in Chartres. For decades, this event was small, known mostly to traditional Catholic circles, but today it has exploded. More than 15,000 young people take part, most of them under the age of 30. They walk with rosaries in hand, banners held high, and hymns rising into the air. They endure rain, mud, blisters, and exhaustion, yet they walk with joy. They walk with conviction. They walk because they believe their faith is worth the sacrifice. For anyone watching from the outside, the sight is astonishing. In a country where Catholicism was dismissed as dead, tens of thousands of young men and women are publicly declaring that it is alive, and they are not doing it in silence. They are chanting in Latin, singing ancient hymns, kneeling on the roadside for prayer and celebrating the Mass with reverence. These are not the actions of a nostalgic generation clinging to the past. These are the signs of a youth rediscovering something timeless, something eternal, and it is not just Chartres. Every year, a gathering called the Frat brings together over 10,000 teenagers for a massive Catholic youth festival. Imagine the energy. Stadiums filled not for concerts or sports, but for mass prayer and adoration. Young people cheering not for celebrities, but for Christ present in the Eucharist. For many of them, it is a transformative moment. They return to their schools, their parishes, and their families with renewed faith, ready to witness in environments that may be hostile to belief. Then there is Congress Mission, a national summit for evangelization held each year in Paris. Thousands of Catholics, priests, religious, and lay people alike come together to share strategies for bringing the faith into a post-Christian society. Workshops focus on how to evangelize on campuses, in workplaces, in art, and in digital spaces. The majority of participants are under 35. They are not content with keeping faith private. They are determined to bring Christ into the heart of French culture once again. What makes these events so striking is that they are not being driven by hierarchy or obligation. They are being driven by desire. Desire for meaning, desire for truth, desire for God. This is not the Catholicism of the past, tied to politics or power. This is Catholicism reborn through authenticity, but perhaps the most surprising front of revival in France is happening in the digital world. For a nation often seen as secular and skeptical, the internet has become an unlikely pulpit. YouTube channels run by ordinary lay Catholics are drawing hundreds of thousands of viewers. Are not flashy. They are not gimmicky. They are simple, sincere, and powerful. Young men and women share their testimonies of conversion. Priests explain theology in clear, relatable terms. Families post about living the faith in everyday life. Kid audiences are listening. Some channels and podcasts are reaching people who would never step foot in a church. A student scrolling through videos late at night suddenly finds himself watching a testimony about the Eucharist. A young mother searching for parenting advice stumbles upon a Catholic podcast about raising children in faith. An atheist curious about philosophy ends up listening to a priest unpack the meaning of suffering. These digital encounters often become the first step on a journey back to the sacraments. Even more astonishing are the live streams of Eucharistic adoration. Every evening, thousands of viewers from across France tune in to kneel virtually before the Blessed Sacrament. For some, it is the only way they feel brave enough to begin. For others, it is a lifeline when illness, distance, or anxiety keeps them from church. What might look like a small screen becomes, for many, a window into heaven. And slowly but surely, those online moments are leading to in-person encounters. Confession lines are growing longer. Masses are filling again. Instagram and TikTok, often criticized for shallow content, are also becoming unexpected tools of evangelization. Catholic influencers post reflections, saint quotes, and prayer challenges. But what makes them effective is not polish, it is vulnerability. They speak honestly about struggles, doubts, and failures. They show that faith is not about perfection, but about perseverance, and that honesty is reaching hearts that traditional sermons might never touch. France is learning that evangelization in the 21st century requires both tradition, ancient liturgies and modern live streams, candlelit vigils and Instagram reels, pilgrimages on muddy trails and testimonies on podcasts. Together, they form a mosaic of revival. And what is even more beautiful is that this revival is not limited to events or technology. It is visible in everyday life. In university classrooms, where students are unafraid to debate questions of God. In cafes, where groups of friends gather to pray before meals. In city parks, where young people kneel on the grass during open-air masses. In workplaces, where employees quietly but confidently witness to their colleagues. Catholicism is no longer confined to hidden chapels. It is beginning to reclaim public space. Of course, this revival is not without challenges. France remains deeply secular, and hostility toward religion is still strong in many circles. Some universities are quick to dismiss faith as superstition. Some media outlets portray Catholic practice as strange or regressive, and within families, young converts sometimes face confusion or even rejection from parents who long ago left the faith. But these obstacles have only sharpened the courage of the young. They are not retreating into silence. They're stepping forward with boldness. There is something deeply countercultural about this movement. In a world that tells young people to chase success, comfort, and pleasure, these Catholics are choosing prayer, sacrifice, and service. They are choosing to spend nights in adoration instead of parties. They are choosing pilgrimages instead of vacations. They are choosing community rooted in faith rather than fleeting digital connections. They are, in every sense, building a counterculture of hope, and perhaps that is why it is spreading. Because deep down, every human heart longs for more than entertainment. Every soul longs for truth, beauty, and love. And when young Catholics in France live their faith authentically, they awaken that longing in others. The irony is powerful. The nation once known as the champion of secularism is now becoming the stage for one of Europe's most unexpected spiritual revivals. And while it remains fragile and hidden from many headlines, it is impossible to deny that something is changing. Catholic faith in France is not just surviving, it is growing. But the question remains, where is this going? Can this fragile revival truly transform a nation that has spent more than a century pushing God away? Or will it remain a hidden fire, warming only a few hearts while the wider culture stays cold? To answer that, we must look even deeper at the return to tradition, the rediscovery of sacraments, the powerful testimonies of those who are not just attending events, but radically changing their lives. That is where the story becomes even more astonishing. And that is where we will go next. As we come to the final part of this journey, the question is no longer whether Catholic faith is reawakening in France. The question is how far this revival will go and what it truly means. One of the most striking signs is the return to tradition. In a world obsessed with speed, noise, and novelty, young Catholics in France are flocking to practices once thought outdated. Gregorian chant fills ancient abbeys again, not as museum pieces, but as living prayer. The Latin Mass, dismissed decades ago as a relic, is now drawing crowds of young families and university students. Midnight vigils, candlelit rosaries, and Eucharistic processions through city streets, no longer rare events, they are becoming powerful public witnesses. Even confessionals, which once gathered dust, now host long lines as people rediscover the healing mercy of forgiveness. During seasons like Lent and Advent, cathedrals in Paris, Strasbourg, and Bordeaux are overflowing. Some parishes must bring in extra priests because so many want to receive confession and communion. These are not empty rituals. They are moments of transformation, where hearts are softened and lives are changed. In the silence of adoration, in the glow of candlelight, in the whispered words of absolution, faith is becoming alive again. And while this revival is deeply French, it is also part of a wider global story. Across the world, Catholicism is growing. In unexpected places, Nigeria's seminaries are so full they can hardly keep up with the vocations. In Poland, faith remains woven into daily life. In Latin America, pilgrimages and devotions continue to attract millions. But France is unique, because here faith is rising from ashes. For decades, France was held up as the symbol of post-Christian Europe, and yet today, it is quietly proving that no culture is too far gone, no nation too secular, no generation too lost. The lesson is clear. Faith does not die. It may fade, it may lie dormant, but it only takes one spark to set it ablaze again. France reminds us that God never abandons his people. Even in silence, even in doubt, even in exile, he waits for the moment to return. And when he does not come with force, but with love, one heart at a time. So what does this mean for you? Maybe you live in a place where faith feels weak. Maybe you feel surrounded by people who say belief is old-fashioned. Maybe you yourself have wondered if God is truly near. France is a living reminder that revival is always possible. It can start with one prayer, one act of trust, one decision to turn back to God. Thank you for staying with this story until the end. If you found hope in it, don't keep it to yourself. Like it. Subscribe for more stories of faith that the world is not talking about but should. Because the revival in France is not just their story. It is a reminder that faith can rise anywhere, even in your own life, right now.